election system. Joe's against it. And the reason that he's against it is interesting to me. The argument is that he's making is that he believes that sweeping changes to our electoral system could put us in a situation that could worsen our political partisan divide. And the look that my wife just gave me was probably the absolute right one. Kind of that, what exactly are you talking about? How is that even possible? And this is the reality of the moment that we live in. Joe Manchin lives in this world that he thinks, and maybe it's because he runs in the same circles as a number of the Republicans, and they still are buddies. Maybe that's it. That that they're whispering things to him that nobody else can possibly hear. Maybe Joe Manchin's hearing is at a level of that even dogs can't hear, because that's the only language I think that Republicans are talking about being nonpartisan. But he's saying that I'm not going to allow any of the election stuff, the HR1, SB1 stuff to go through because, well, it'll tear us apart even more. Now, understand, this is something that, last legislative session, he signed on to. He was a co-sponsor of. And this is another one of those moments where you go, well, he was a co-sponsor then when it didn't stand the snowball's chance and of passing. But now, no, we need bipartisanship. And here's this weird moment for me. Because the Republicans right now are doing everything they can possibly do to make voting harder. There are hundreds of bills banging around in, I think it was 43 states, of the voter ID stuff that we know doesn't work, isn't a problem. No one's been able to say, see, this voter ID could have stopped this. Nobody. And even the state of Pennsylvania, when they were fighting the voter ID here in this state, the Commonwealth said, look, in the stipulation of fact, I've got it in writing somewhere, and you can easily find it online. They said very clearly, there has never been a case that we can find. We can cite nothing. We literally can cite no case in which voter ID would have stopped any fraud whatsoever. This is a solution that we can't even find one case of a problem. So as a friend of mine said, this is the best mousetrap on the moon. They're making the best mousetrap that you can put on the moon. Because there isn't a problem here. But understand, it's not about, for them, election security. It's about keeping people from voting. Republicans are going all full well through on that. Going to try and stop early voting, going to try and make it harder to vote by mail, all of the things that people like, making it simpler to participate in our democracy. They're making it harder. As where Senate Bill 1 and HR 1 would make it easier, would open up more opportunities to vote early, more opportunities to vote by mail, the no excuse early voting stuff, easier registration, same day registration, making sure that everyone has access to the ballot box as a matter of right. Would set some minimum standards for states. Not allow them to have the shenanigans they've pulled in the past. Set a groundwork, which I am not opposed to. Personally, I said I think the best way, and I was not always a mail-in ballot person until this last election. And now I've become someone who's advocating for it because it's partially what I've always asked for. I've always wanted a hand-marked paper ballot. A hand-marked paper ballot that I can count over and over and over again. And that you have strict guidelines on how to get the ballot, how to return the ballot, and how it is put into the system, so that we can make sure that everyone who got a ballot and sends it back in is marked down and that ballot is counted. And we can do that. and we can do it safely and we can do it securely. The problem is there are those, and I hate being this partisan, but it's the Republicans who don't want everyone to vote. And they've been telling us this for years, for decades. Their power goes up as the voting populace's voting goes down. But also this legislation that Manchin doesn't want would also change how we fund our elections, which would make it more competitive for people who aren't millionaires and billionaires or don't have millionaire and billionaire backers, which means maybe we'll get more working class people in the halls of Congress to be able to write laws that help them, which is why we don't get the things that people want. Our folks in Congress, some of them I like, are too detached. They're not leading the lives of the rest of we the people, and we need to hold them accountable for that. So Joe Manchin, on that side, taking a lot of heat. On the other side, he is saying that he wants an enormous infrastructure package because, look, West Virginia needs to be rebuilt. Oh, no, I'm sorry, hold on. West Virginia needs to be built. Especially the southern part of it that is, like going back in time. There are major investments that could be made. There are jobs that could be brought to that state if Joe Manchin, would not be Joe Manchin. Now, here's the fear. You can't beat up on him too much. And this is where Democrats had better watch their P's and Q's. Because if they tick him off, they send him off to go, you know what, the heck with you. I'm going to go be a Republican. You just lost the Senate. Because we're in this really precarious moment where it's one old white guy's ticker going out that could swing the control of the Senate one way or the other. And this is why I think what's going on is Joe Biden is seeing this as an opportunity to be bold and to be visionary and to do big things. And even to a degree, Manchin saying, look, we need an enormous infrastructure package. We need big spending. And we've needed it for a very long time. Again, not new, not surprising. What is kind of surprising is he's saying that he's in favor of raising some taxes. He's saying, to a reasonable position. I don't know what that means, but I guess any jump is better. He's talking about raising the corporate tax rate from the 21% to at least 25%. Which is still way below where it was before Donald Trump dropped it all the way down. So this is how Republicans continue to win. Something starts off over here. They negotiate it back. Democrats go halfway back to where it was. Democrats lose control. Republicans take over, take it even further. Democrats get control, bring it back to half of that. And now you've just given them what they started off wanting. And there's part of me that goes, we should just give them what they want because they're going to get it anyway, because most Democrats are just terrible at negotiating, which is why I wish we had more working class voices in Congress who'd be willing to roll up their sleeves and say, I don't think so. But it's going to be interesting to see what the coming days in a Joe Manchin world are going to look like. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do we need to spend big money on infrastructure? You ready for it? Do we need the jobs? I think we do. And I think we do big. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day the Exxon Valdez oil tanker spilled nearly 11 million gallons of oil in Prince William Sound off the coast of Alaska. The ship ran aground and collided with Bly's Reef. Most people remember the captain was held primarily responsible for the spill. By his own admission, he had passed out after a night of heavy drinking. But a number of factors also contributed to the environmental disaster. The National Transportation Safety Board issued its final report over a year later. In it, the board concluded that fatigue, reduced crews, and problems with regulations and procedures regarding Exxon's drug and alcohol program all contributed to the spill. Union officials reported great concern regarding chronic fatigue of its members on merchant ships, reduced crews due to greater automation, and reduced scheduled ship maintenance. Crew members on the Exxon Valdez routinely worked 20 hours or more a day during routine cargo handling operations. The NTSB also concluded that vessel traffic service under the U.S. Coast Guard failed to properly track the Exxon Valdez. They had the ability to select a higher radar scale, but didn't. The Coast Guard suffered from reduced crews burdened with increased job duties as well. They also found that remote communication sites were inoperable on the night of the spill. The equipment was old, deteriorating from harsh weather conditions. Requested funding for new equipment has been forthcoming. The Alyeska Pipeline Company, for its part, failed to have an oil spill barge loaded and ready to go. Major cleanup efforts were conducted during the spring and summer months through 1992, but marine life and the environments were devastated. Long-term efforts at monitoring and cleanup continue today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the news today, President Biden has reached out and tapped Vice President Kamala Harris to be the lead person on what's going on down on the southern border. And look, I think from the beginning, the Biden administration, I think they screwed up from the start. If it were me, I would have put a camera in every one of those places, a reporter in every place, the day they took over, so that they could have documented just how bad the situation was when Donald Trump left. Look at all the craziness and all the crisis that he left, so that when you're 2 months in, someone can't say, look what you've done, because this is where we are. No matter what he does, he's in a losing position because nobody saw where he started from. And here to share some thoughts on what is going on our southern border and what Joe Biden needs to do to clean this up, I've asked our good friend Hassan Ahmad to come talk with us. Hassan is an immigration lawyer and advocate. Thanks for taking time for us, Hassan.
Hey, always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So I'm of this mindset that I think Biden screwed up. I think they should have immediately opened the doors, let reporters in, let everyone in to see how bad the conditions were, because that's the bottom. I hope you can only get better from there.
I would hope so. And transparency is always a good thing, and sunlight disinfects. I believe that strongly with every fiber of my heart. But when you can't see what's going on, that's exactly where the problems begin. And so, yeah, I share your concern and share that sentiment that if we could see what's going on, it would at least provide a benchmark. But I think the larger issue is that it's really not a crisis. This is really nothing more than the regular seasonal shift that you've seen every single year, going back like 20 years or 30 years. And the numbers that we're talking about, I mean, look, I'm pulling these numbers that I'm about to say from CBP data, from Border Patrol data. Numbers were a lot higher in terms of apprehensions at the border 20 years ago. In January, in the year 2000, we had apprehensions in excess of 200,000 per year. January 2021, 78,323. So, when the weather starts to warm up and springtime comes in, there's always been a seasonal shift. And it is a little bit larger this year because of pent up demand, because of Corona, people that would have come, last year, but for the pandemic. But in terms of looking historically, the Southwest border apprehensions peaked in the 80s and the 90s. It went up to a peak of 1.6 million in 2000. And we're talking about numbers that are 50% of that now. And for some reason, it's being termed a crisis. The border apprehension stayed above 1 million for the vast majority of the 1990s. The current numbers of 800,000 was reached back in 1953 and stayed that way between 1977 and 1982, when it started to increase on a trajectory up to 1.6 million in the late 1990s. So, there's no crisis. It is a border, and hopefully it just needs to be managed better.
Yeah. But
that's my take on it.
And I'm sure you're seeing this too. All I'm reading is that there's this big crisis. that there are caravans of people with Biden shirts, running to the border. I'm hearing Republicans screaming that that now their kids in cages, and they're screaming all of these things that it's all Biden's fault. And I'm going, one, he's only been in office 2 months. You can't snap your fingers and undo 40 years of neglect. And if any finger should be pointed at anyone, it should be at Congress for not actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, that you've touched on two really important points, Rick, and one is that first of all, they're entering into a system, regardless of how well you manage the border. The system that migrants and asylum seekers and people that are coming across the border are entering into is a completely dysfunctional system. Now, I'm not going to say broken, because I think it's functioning the way it doesn't function by design, but they're coming into a broken system. So how well can you manage a border that controls the flow of people in two directions when the system that is supposed to take them in is so horribly dysfunctional? That's one thing. And the second thing is that, yes, we do have to address the root causes of migration, but until we fix that system at home that actually works in a way that actually empowers people and actually doesn't trap them in here and creates a permanent underclass to exploit, I'm afraid that a lot of the work that Vice President Harris is gonna do is just not going to be successful.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what she's going to do,
Right.
because there's no directive. It's just going to be putting out fires on both sides. It's going to be the Republicans seeing this as an opportunity to beat Biden up at every opportunity to say, look, you still have all these people locked up. You're still doing all this stuff. And now we've got the comment of all of these children who are unaccompanied that we have to deal with. Is this a larger number? Is this something new? Is this something we can pin on Joe Biden?
It's nothing we haven't seen before. Migration follows patterns, cycles. They go up, they go down. Sometimes it's more families, sometimes it's more. And then when different policies come out, for example, the CAM policy, Central American Minor Policy, that was started by Obama in 2014, we saw it would adjust or change or affect the way the numbers, the influx of people coming in. But I mean, to see Republicans at the border and all this screaming and noise making, the reason that's happening, Rick, is because they need a crisis.
Right.
Let's just cut to the chase here. They need a crisis. Greg Sargent wrote in the Washington Post about how he hoped that Vice President Harris's appointment to the border was going to hopefully shift the narrative, away from border mania to addressing the root causes of migration. But honestly, I don't think that's going to happen, because I know how strong and how powerful and how loud, I should say, the anti-immigrant voices are, and how much of a stranglehold they have on the entire Republican Party, especially after 4 years of being galvanized under Trump. They're not going to let that narrative shift happen. They need this crisis. They need it.
And the weird thing is because, when you look at if it were possible to get Congress to do their job, and maybe you'll agree with me on this, I don't care which side of the issue that you're on. If Congress actually did get something done, nobody's going to be happy. There's no one going to be happy, because I look at the left screaming at Biden, who they're claiming he's just as bad as Trump was. We're right where we started from. He's done little to change anything. I mean, it's going to be, we're not letting enough people in. We're making it too difficult to get in. You're going to hear the same things, and nobody's going to be happy. Even if we did get some policy, or am I off base?
It's become such a polarized issue that I think that a small but vocal and loud minority on either side of the spectrum is likely to do that. And that's why it's important to take those views into account. But remember that the vast majority of Americans want to see a system that actually works. They don't want people to be stuck in backlogs. They don't want kids to be in cages. They don't want to see, we've tried it the enforcement way for years, and this is where we are. Look at where we are. Look at what's going on now. There always are going to be people that are going to be unhappy. But it should not deter this administration from even-handedly pushing towards a compassionate policy that works for everybody.
So let me ask you this now, because if you're Joe Biden, or if you're advising him, what does that compassionate policy look like? What does what you're talking about look like?
I think that a good portion of these reforms, for example, TPS, path to citizenship for TPS and DED holders, or the Dream and Promise Act, for example, they need to be pushed as part of a budget reconciliation process, so that we don't have to find and convince 10 Republicans in the Senate to pass it. A lot of these people and some of the rules, some of the immigration laws that are very arcane and very few people understand them. Just the reversal of those one or two or three things. So, for example, the 3 and 10 year bars, the permanent bar, redefining the aggravated felony, conviction, things like that, that most people don't understand. These small changes can have enormous effect on millions of people. I mean, look at how susceptible the entire system was to manipulation in the hands of the Trump administration, right? The entire system is, in a lot of ways, subject to executive order. If it can go one way, it can go the other. All it needs is the political will and the courage to actually get something done. And a lot of this benefit for millions of people can come through those executive orders and smaller piecemeal reforms that actually have a chance at passing through either as part of a budget reconciliation or finding like-minded Republicans who are just tired of this over politicization of immigration and saying, you know what, this isn't going to be that bad.
We hear a lot about asylum, and you're the attorney here.
Sure.
From what the folks on the left are telling me is that a lot of people try and come here and under claiming asylum, and overwhelmingly they're rejected because of one reason or another, and that's the reason the system is broken, because legal immigration has been shut off, so everybody's jamming the asylum system, and most people don't qualify under the asylum, and that's why things are so screwed up. Is there anything to that?
No, I would actually disagree. First of all, asylum is legal immigration. People might not look at it that way. A lot of immigrants themselves might not look at things that way. But 8 U.S.C. 1158, I mean, it's in the law. We are a signatory to the Refugee Convention. It is absolutely legal immigration. It is a different way, a different path, but it is legal immigration. That's the first point. And the second point is, you're talking about people applying for a system, applying for an immigration benefit, in this case, asylum, without the benefit of counsel. In the vast majority of cases, no attorney is provided for them. And asking them to navigate a labyrinthine system, which is rivaled only by the US tax code. And on top of that, it's as if that wasn't enough, to have people who don't speak English largely to navigate this Byzantine system, not provide them an attorney, and then they start moving the goalposts. So it really is a situation of, it's really easy to say that a lot of asylum cases are denied, but really when you look at the root causes of it, well, it's because you're not giving them access to counsel. And it's because you keep moving the goalposts. Attorney General Sessions and Barr, they utilize this little known power in the immigration code to certify pro-immigrant decisions of the Board of Immigration Appeals to themselves for the sole purpose of gutting them. Why would they do that? Because they wanted to change the laws and the cases that asylum seekers rely on in order to make their case. So, you can't, it's a rigged table. It's a rigged table. You can't go around and blame asylum seekers and conclude that because they went through this rigged system, that somehow their asylum claims lacked merit.
One of the other questions that pops up, and I get this from a lot of my Trump supporter friends, is, how many people are we talking about? How many people should we bring in a year? This seems to be a big concern. People understand, we want to have people to be able to come to the country, but we just can't fling the doors open and absorb Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and every country in South America. Is there a limit? Is there a wall? Is there something to that to give them
limit,
solace, right? To believe that we're just not going to take in the entire rest of the world? Because understand, this is going to get much worse as climate change becomes worse. As the effects of climate change, ravage these areas, people are naturally going to be coming where the high ground is, and we've got to have a policy in place.
Sure, no, and these are all concerns that I've heard before. Hey, we might actually see American migration to Canada, if it gets too hot, right?
Exactly.
Maybe it'll go that way. But no, I would say a couple of things in response to that. First of all, where are all the market lovers, the lovers of capitalism? Why not let the market decide? When it comes to people being able to come here, let the market decide where based on labor needs. We've had these sort of programs in the past, the Bracero program in the 1940s and 1950s, various guest worker programs. It's only when these anti-immigrant groups started to gain power and influence that all of a sudden the normal trickle, the normal flow of migrants into the United States all of a sudden became this flood, this huge invasion, this onslaught, and this huge wave. And oh my God, when is it going to stop? Look, let's put some numbers talk about some numbers to put this in perspective. Lebanon right now, has absorbed 10% of its population. Okay, 10% of its population. In order for us to get are refugees now from Syria and neighboring countries. In order for us to get to that point, or 10% of our population, we're talking about like 80 some million people, right? That would be more than the entire populations of Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, the entire Northern Triangle, and some other countries in Central America combined, all right? The number of border apprehensions that I talked about before, we're talking about a tiny fraction of the populations of these countries. It is a trickle, and it's being made into a raging river, mountain out of a molehill, if you want to call it that. So, let's keep this in perspective. We're not talking about the vast majority of people that you actually meet. If you actually sit down and talk to an asylum seeker, I spent days, in Tijuana in 2018, and of course the 18 years or 19 years of experience I've had, dealing with asylum cases. Nobody ever chooses never to be able to go home. Most of them say, you know what, I was fine. I was doing okay. I had my business. I had my, we were doing well. I was laying bricks. I was growing beans. I was doing whatever, but I was forced to leave. It's called forced displacement for a reason. It's called refugee, and it's called asylum seeking for a reason. Yeah. These people didn't have a choice, whether it was civil unrest or a natural disaster or climate change or what have you. People didn't have a choice.
Yeah, so isn't this a moment where a policy maybe we can begin to agree on to start is to help those folks stay in their communities by changing how things are there on a certain level, or is that just not possible?
No, I think it is possible. And I think the heart's in the right place to talk about the root causes of migration and whatnot. But the system itself that people are being funneled into here, it doesn't let people leave unless it's on a deportation flight, courtesy of ICE Air, right? I keep going back to the 3 and 10 year bars, but this is part of a larger problem that I've talked about on your show before, about managing the border and not thinking of it as a wall with a door on it that can be open and shut, right? A border works when people can flow across it, goods, ideas, services, and people can flow across it in both directions. And with these bars in place that allow that, deny people the opportunity for any meaningful path at obtaining lawful citizenship, and then saying that if they do decide to leave, that they're going to be barred for 10 years after they've set roots in here, no one's going to leave. Yeah. No one's going to leave. Yeah. The reason we have 11 million undocumented people in the country is because of short-sighted policies like this.
That's a good point.
So if it worked better and people could actually come and go, right, and be able to work, live in their home countries, and be able to come and visit, we know who they are, they're registered, they've got paperwork, they don't have to rely on these on these smugglers and traffickers and undertake a perilous journey and go into all of who wants to give money to a smuggler if there was a lawful route to actually get it done, to be able to come and go if it was safe.
Excellent point.
Who in their right mind would send their kid alone trekking across the desert for 3 months?
No, you're spot on, and we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to do in the coming days, weeks, and months. And Hassan, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I hope you'll come back and share some more as this continues.
Always a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the birthday of Dorothy Height, a civil rights leader and a champion for black women domestic workers. Domestic workers had largely been left out of the labor protections passed as part of the New Deal. Dorothy had grown up seeing firsthand how this exclusion impacted the women who cleaned homes and did other domestic work. Dorothy was born in Richmond, Virginia. Her mother was a nurse in a black hospital. But when the family relocated to Pennsylvania, her mother could not find work as a nurse. Like many black women who moved north during this time period, Dorothy's mother took a job as a domestic worker. She worked long hours for low wages. As Dorothy became involved in civil rights organizing, she remembered the experiences of her mother. In 1957, she was elected president of the National Council of Negro Women. From that position, she became a leader in the effort to improve working conditions for domestic workers. She became one of the leaders of the National Committee on Household Employment. This committee brought together representatives from 23 organizations concerned about domestic labor. Dorothy explained the urgency of the effort, stating, "Let's treat household employment as a profession in which workers have a contract and are assured fair hours and compensation, as well as coverage by our protective labor laws." Today, labor organizers are still fighting to win fair working conditions for domestic workers. Grassroots organizing has led states like New York and California to pass a domestic workers' Bill of Rights. Similar efforts are underway in other states to give workers the dignity and the respect that they earn. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the good news, as I've been saying, I'm thrilled to see a labor guy as the head of labor. Marty Walsh confirmed, did his first interview, and look, said some interesting things. You've got to take on the inequality that's gone on in this country. We can't shy away from the words white privilege. We've got to get OSHA back to doing its job. The guy's got his work cut out for him. Look, I don't envy him. He's got a lot of cleaning up to do after the mess that has been the last 4 years, and I would argue the last 40. And here to share some thoughts on the confirmation of Marty Walsh, and hopefully a confirmation of a deputy secretary. I've asked Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the secretary-treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course, happy to be here.
So let's start with Marty Walsh. Were you surprised he got confirmed? There was some talk, there was some rumblings. Don't want a union thug leading up the Department of Labor. Ultimately, he got through.
No, I wasn't surprised. I mean, yes, he's a labor person through and through, and that's great. And that's why the labor movement backed him. That's why we wanted him in that job. He knows the value that unions bring to the workplace, and he understands why they're important and why they built the middle class. So I'm not surprised, because he also was a successful administrator of a major city in this country. He did a good job. And you don't do that without having really good skills and a sharp intellect. So they may want to oppose somebody because he's a labor thug, but you know what? When we have a story to tell about what value unions bring to the country, we usually win that story. And I think he's a prime example of that, about why the union story wins.
Yeah, and it's a good story. I mean, to be honest, he's had a lot of obstacles in his life that he's overcome. He had some addiction problems. He's a regular person. And this, to me, these are the kind of people I want in government. If we had some of those in the U.S. Senate, maybe all the good ideas wouldn't go there to die.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's no substitute for lived experience, for being there and fighting the battles on the ground, and bringing that into government and understanding how federal policy on labor issues impact individual members. And there is no substitute for that. That's an important part, and hopefully something that he brings to this job. I talked to him a couple of times now, and he stressed to me that like his family, they work at MTA, they work on the T in Boston. Like those are his family members. He understands the jobs that our members are doing and that members across the country are doing, and he's going to bring that perspective to the job, which is really important.
Yeah, and like I said, he's got a lot to clean up. I mean, let's start first with OSHA. I mean, the reality is OSHA was MIA during the entire pandemic, and in fact, I still think they are. So that's part of under his control. To me, this has got to be one of those first things that he addresses.
Yes, it is. I mean, workplace safety right now during a pandemic, the fact that they took a pass essentially for the past year plus is a crime. That is not something that our federal government, especially an agency that's supposed to govern workplace safety, should be doing during one of the biggest crises, public health crises in our lifetimes. And he has, as you said, his work cut out for him to make sure that we right these wrongs and make sure that not only are we addressing the ongoing problems with workplace safety and healthcare concerns for workers, frontline workers, but that we're prepared for the next time this happens. And that's part of what the OSHA ETS would do, is make sure that we set a standard for the future, so that we're not just going to be caught with our pants down the next time there is a public health crisis. And frankly, there's no better term to describe it than caught with our pants down when this happened, because we were completely ill prepared. We were not ready to protect frontline workers. We had to frankly define who they were. And we saw the results of that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I mean, OSHA has been under attack for decades. I mean, the sad reality is every year they throw on Workers' Memorial Day, they throw out the fact that if OSHA were to inspect every workplace in the country, it would take them 140,000 years or some obscene number. And now we're in a moment where the number of OSHA inspectors are at an all-time low. That had everything to do with the Trump administration not replacing people as they left and not prioritizing its job. And we're in this moment. And they've done that with basically every branch of government that benefits we working people.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, look, this administration could not have stepped into a tougher situation when it comes to how to rebuild a functioning government. And it is, frankly, I mean, I look at DOT, that's an agency that I work with the most. I didn't speak to the outgoing secretary not once in 4 years. We had a handful of conversations with modal administrators, and, they didn't really, I think that their level of engagement reflected their priorities. They didn't care about the worker side of the issues. They didn't care about the safety side of the issues. There has been a real shift right now in terms of how DOT at least approaches unions and approaches the men and women who actually make these systems run. And that is, to me, a breath of fresh air. Policy wise, we need to see more. We're going to get, I think that the regulatory process in the federal government is not something where you snap your fingers and voila, we have a new world. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think they're making the right steps to get to a government that puts safety and workers first and not corporate profits first.
Yeah. Now, as we're talking about this giant Build Back Better plan that's being, rumored about, whispered about, there's nothing concrete, obviously. In fact, Joe Manchin today said he wants an enormous plan. The number's somewhere around $3 trillion, I've heard. This is a big undertaking where I want people in government who are going to be focusing on the needs of working people, whether it's at the Department of Transportation or the Department of Labor or Commerce or Interior or any of that. I want to make sure that worker-centric policies are at the forefront of everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We need to make sure that this, the Build Back Better, that tagline, which clearly everybody is bought into on the Democratic Party, and I think a lot of unions are subscribed to. That means that we're building back in a way that creates more wage equity, economic security, that we're investing in programs that make the biggest impact, not only for for companies, but for workers. And making sure that if you're going to put $3 trillion into infrastructure, you need to make sure that there are labor protections attached to it, that it's invested in things like safe programs and making sure that we have substantial transit, we have good passenger rail service, we're building roads and bridges in a way that promotes good jobs. All of that will not only provide the safest and best transportation system, but it will do so in a way that rises the entire economy. So you have more wages, more better wages and more better jobs in a way that is frankly more sustainable for the future. In a way that we when you look at ways where you start cutting costs and thinking we can do it cheaper, it's self-defeating in the long run, because all you're doing is cutting corners and not looking at the broader picture in terms of how our economy and our country can function in a healthier way.
Yeah, and for me, it comes down to the tale of two bridges. I look at the Tappan Zee in New York and the Bay Bridge in California. In California, they decided, hey, we're going to try and use as cheap a labor as we can. We're going to bring in as much Chinese, this, that, and the other stuff as we can, and we're going to do it as far as on the cheap as we can. And in New York, they used all union labor. They did it under a project labor agreement. Actually got it done under time and under budget, whereas I don't think the Bay Bridge is ever going to be actually complete. Because I'm told it's never going to actually be finished. So for me, it's the tale of two bridges. When you look at Build Back Better, which model worked better? And I would argue the New York model with domestic consumption, with union labor, and with a project labor agreement, they did it much better.
You're 100% right. And there's a reason why Davis Bacon and PLAs have bipartisan support in Congress, especially in the House side. You have members of Congress on the Republican side who made their living as contractors and as people who built stuff, and they will tell you PLAs are our friend. That means that I knew I was going to get the best work, and it was going to be on time and under budget. And the benefit of that, you have the best possible work, and you're going to make sure that people also have sustainable wages and all that. And, it is learned experience that provides that sort of support within Congress. And frankly, I hope that, more people in the U.S. Senate start to see it that way as well.
Well, I hope more people in general, because, I remember a couple of years ago, and it was one of these amazing conversations that I had with some folks. There was a guy who decided one day he was angry at this thing called the PLA, and he was going to take his sign and he was going to walk from York, Pennsylvania, all the way to Washington, D.C. And all you heard was the local media saying, here's so-and-so, and he's angry at these PLAs, and he's taken to the streets. And the message was, this guy, these are bad, and he's demonstrating in a good way against something bad. And I can't tell you how many people came to me and said, well, I heard these PLAs are bad. I go, no, you heard one idiot who was taking a walk because he was mad at it. Do you actually know what it is? And I think that's part of the problem. We throw these things out like that, like everyone knows, and I don't think many people know what a project labor agreement actually is.
Sure. No, I mean, and that's the thing. It's an agreement. It is agreed to by both sides, and there are conditions on that. And frankly, the condition on one side is we make sure we have better wages, and the other side is we make sure you deliver the job on time. And they work for the public, and they work for the workers. And there's proven success there, to your point. I've told you before, I think the last time we spoke, I ranted against the idea that we so often when you start talking about labor disputes, someone's high salary gets thrown out into the press, and everybody just rags on how they're not worth that. They don't deserve to get paid that much, instead of thinking about how do we build everybody else up. And that's ultimately what the labor movement is about, that we make sure that everybody should be paid what they're worth. And it's not about making sure that like somebody is paid more than me and they don't deserve it. No, how about we start thinking collectively about how we all deserve to be paid our worth here. And there's enough wealth in this country. We need to make sure that everybody is sharing in all of that.
I'm glad you brought that up because today obviously is equal pay day. And I've had a number of people reach out to me and say, you know, what we need to do is we need men's wages to come down to meet women's. And I'm going, no, we need women's wages to come up to men's. Just in what you said, there's this bizarre thinking that we need to stifle someone so that everyone else can catch up instead of going, no, let's bring them up. Let's get some equal footing here.
Yeah. No, it's absurd. The idea that, like, for whatever reason, we decided that that the solution to a problem is that, you know, somebody deserves less is it's an unfortunate mindset in this country, and one that really unions are the only organizations prepared to fight against, and we're ready to do it.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. And now now that Marty Walsh is the Secretary of Labor, they're going to need a deputy secretary. And when you guys are out pushing this woman, Polly Trottenberg, as the deputy secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, why her?
She's a pro. She has spent time. She spent time in the Obama administration, doing great work. She was wonderful to work with there in the number 3 job at DOT. She understands the building. She understands the ins and outs of how the federal government works. And she's been an ally to working people for her entire career. I mean, she spent, since she left the Obama administration, spent most of it in New York City running their Department of Transportation. And she came out of it not only with a sterling reputation, but one where the unions who are prominent in that city all supported her and endorsed her for this job. And that goes to show you that you can be an effective administrator and a pro-worker advocate and do a great job. And that's what we expect that she will do in DOT.
Why is this such an important position?
So this has always been, I mean, the secretary's job, that is the face of the agency. The deputy has always been that is the grinding job, the one where you're going to make sure the train's running on time, the policy is right, the politics are right. I mean, Secretary Buttigieg has been wonderful. He is frankly, we couldn't have asked for a better person there who is hit the ground running, extremely interested in the issues, wants to make a big impact in that job. But let's be candid. He not only does he not have a massive transportation background, he doesn't have a huge DC background, like a federal government background. So having someone like Polly, who not only is a extreme expert on transportation issues, she has been and been through the wars in the federal government in a way where she can really help make sure that the vision of Biden and the vision of Secretary Buttigieg are gonna become reality.
So let me ask you the question that virtually every woman now is thinking. You've just laid out a situation. We're talking about equal pay day, and then you laid out a situation where the woman is the one who's really qualified, and the man isn't. And he's the number 1 guy and she's doing all the work. Why didn't we just make her the Secretary of Transportation?
Well, that's a tough question. Look, I think the gifts that Secretary Buttigieg brings are different. The roles require different skill sets. I think Polly would be a wonderful Secretary of Transportation, and maybe someday that will be in the cards. But there are what Secretary Buttigieg brings for what is clearly a number 1 priority for the Biden administration, which is infrastructure investment. Right. This isn't like the number 3 issue. We're going to do healthcare and we're going to do energy, and then eventually we'll get to infrastructure. No, he came in thinking this is going to be his number 1 thing. And he brought somebody in who is extremely high profile that will bring attention to the issues and help work the politics of all this stuff. I think as a team, the 2 of them are going to be really effective. And as far as my understanding is that they truly view it as a team, that they will work together to make this, to implement the president's vision for these issues.
Good stuff. Greg, I appreciate the time. Didn't mean to sandbag you there at the end, but it seemed funny at the moment. But I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
Of course.
Good stuff. Greg Regan, Secretary Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department there of the AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Hello, I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. A union of over 1.4 million strong and growing, AFSCME is gaining improvements in the workplace all across America. And right here in the Commonwealth, more than 95,000 AFSCME members make Pennsylvania happen. Highways, libraries, hospitals, parks, offices, prisons, classrooms, museums, courtrooms. You'll find AFSCME members at work in all these places and many more.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
Today's AFSCME members take on public service jobs as diverse as they are, not for the recognition, but for a better Pennsylvania. For more information, please visit our website at AFSCME13.org. Labor is changing, so is your labor union. We are AFSCME.
Hunters have come up with euphemisms to make what they do sound, well, less unpleasant. For example, animals aren't killed, they're harvested. Corporate America is now adopting this verbal ploy, for CEOs urgently need to soften the image of their constant hunt for ways to kill jobs. Their urgency is that they're now pushing a huge new surge in cuts, this time targeting college-educated, white-collar professionals. Their weapon is the same sort of neutron bomb they've used to dispatch millions of blue-collar workers, robots. But robot is a negative term, so it's been replaced with a nondescript acronym, RPAs, Robotic Process Automation. These sophisticated automatons are armed with artificial intelligence, enabling them to take over cognitive work that had been the niche of such highly paid humans as financial analysts, lawyers, engineers, managers, doctors. More than just an incremental extension of a long, slow automation process, this is a big bang. It's presently ripping through the workforce at warp speed, and most of America's vulnerable employees have no idea of what's coming. In a survey of corporate executives last year, nearly 80% of them had already put some forms of RPA in place, with an additional 16% planning to do so within 3 years. McKinsey, the world's biggest corporate strategy consultant, calculates that these thinking robots will displace 45 million U.S. workers in this decade. This is Jim Hightower saying, returning to the hunting analogy, professional jobs requiring human-level judgment have been presumed to be beyond the range of robotic firepower. But as one labor economist now notes, with the mass deployment of RPA technology, that type of work is much more in the kill path. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, it looks like, this is one of those weird moments. It looks like everybody's ready for the pandemic to be over. Everybody's ready to go maskless and life, woohoo, party time. And I saw that over the weekend. It's one of those things where, I was at an event for work because I had to be there, and everybody that was there, no interest in anything going on. And now the place where I work, they've got a COVID outbreak. Several of my coworkers and their spouses are now sick, and I'm not saying that it came from that event. It probably did. It may have, but it's still very real. So this idea that we're going to, just swing the doors open, life's going to be back to normal, and, we got to get all those kids back in the classrooms, it's still there. And we're so close. Why do we want to screw it up before we get to the end? Because I'll tell you, when I went for my COVID test today, my first thought is I have been the most careful I ever thought I would be in my life of anything, and to have it at this last moment end up with it would just be wrong. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on how do we open up the schools and should we, and in all of that, I've asked Cheryl Gibbs Binkley to come talk with us. She's an education blogger. She blogs over at thirdmillenniumteacher.com. We'll get links out on how you can check out her most recent piece, Gaslit School Nation. Cheryl, thanks for taking time for us.
It's nice to talk with you again, and I think you said it all in the intro. Why screw it up now?
Yeah, I mean, the CDC came out the other day and said, let's not have an avoidable surge. And I thought that was such a perfect frame.
Well, that would be if Rachel Walensky, the head of the CDC, had not then come out with an article in Atlantic saying, treat the kids like grandma who's had her inoculations. They're just as safe. So let them go. Let it be. Which then the epidemiologist came out and called on Atlantic Monthly to withdraw the article because it was so misleading. So we're not out of the woods. We're still being gaslit, even by the new Biden administration. They had a return to school summit today, replete with everyone from Jill Biden opening to Secretary Cardona and Rachel Walensky and Linda Darling Hammond, and closing with Joe Biden. And all of them are still calling for opening schools right away as thoroughly as possible.
Yeah, see, for me, it just seems like, we're at the end of March. You got April, you got May. We're almost through the year. Let's get through what we've been doing, pick it up next year, and start fixing if we can. I mean, I'm hoping by then, because my fear is if we booger it up now, and these variants take off and we start seeing another rise, that who knows what happens down the road. But my mind is come fall, maybe we're ready to reopen. Maybe we're able to get kids back in the classroom 5 days a week with some kind of remediation and some kind of setup, but not now.
Well, the encouragement from the administration today was to not only they've required testing in the schools nationally now, which Joe Biden had promised in his campaign that he would end the testing, but now they are requiring testing this spring, which will mean children have to be in classrooms to take most of those tests because they don't have the bandwidth or the digital infrastructure to conduct them distantly. So by requiring the test, they're requiring the kids to go back in the spring, and the encouragement today was a full set of recommendations about conducting summer school to put kids back in classrooms for summer school.
In your opinion, is there any way to do that safely? Because look, I have people telling me, well, we're going to be wearing masks, we're going to social distance, we're going to do the contact tracing, we're going to be hyper vigilant on testing. Is there a way to do this in a safe way that you obviously test as often as you can, obviously you do what you can to separate and all of that, and then if there is an outbreak, you react to those individual outbreaks? Is that possible or just not?
Have you ever been around a bunch of elementary school kids?
Yes, I have, and the reason I'm not an elementary school teacher is because I have been, and I give them. And you'll never hear me say a bad word about a school teacher because I got 3 kids. I have a hard enough time corralling those 3, let alone a room of 30 or 40.
All I can say is they pick their nose and lick surfaces. When we ask, can this be done safely? I shouldn't say that. That is, I will admit, a bit of joke. But but at the same time, the expectation that we can mitigate our way out of this has not held true for Europe. The European countries are having to reclose their schools right now because they jumped the gun.
Right.
And they are regretting it deeply. The speech from Belgium's president this week was poignantly painful because, and from the Netherlands, was it the Netherlands, Sweden, the teacher infections were double what they would have been had they not reopened the schools. Now, we have been vaccinating our teachers, but we're only at about 50%. So half of our teachers are not vaccinated. And this was never entirely about just protecting teachers or staff. It was about protecting children.
Right.
And the two studies this week that tell me this is folly to attempt this right now. There are actually three big events this week. One is that here in Fairfax County, they did a study of antibodies among children and adults that the hospital sponsored, and it was co-sponsored by the health department, not by the schools. It turns out that the number of children having antibodies that would indicate they have been infected is double the number that they projected. The second thing that is disturbing to me is that when the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia conducted a similar study, they did blood work on the blood of children who had been who were antibody positive, and it was showing markers for long-term vascular damage. That kind of, if we know, and this was for kids symptomatic or asymptomatic, didn't matter. If the antibodies were there, the marker for vascular damage was there. If we know that kids are asymptomatic but maybe still incurring damage to their vascular systems, we are totally irresponsible if we expose them in any way. And so the argument that, oh, they'll be safe, they're fine, they don't have symptoms, is just, it's cherry picking the data. The data that is telling people to go back to school, like the recent Massachusetts data, is based on our studies based on self-reporting from school systems.
Right. So
I can tell you, FCPS, when they were reporting 788 cases of students with COVID, the superintendent was saying only one or two of those cases may have been affiliated with school exposure. Yet I knew at the same time of 6 teachers who had cases in their classrooms but had not been informed of any testing or tracing that was done related to those cases. So what about those 6 cases that were not followed up on as far as we know?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the sad part of all of this, is that you really can't trust the numbers that are coming out from anybody.
That is the dilemma. That is the dilemma.
So what do you say on the other side of this, though, Cheryl?
Children don't get it. I was looking at daily at the data from the state health department, and there were just as many children 0 to 20 in my county as there were people 70 and above in my county with cases.
Yeah, but they weren't dying, so they didn't get the attention.
Yeah.
So the
Correct.
argument is that the young kids are going to be okay through this, and that because I'd like your thoughts on this. I mean, they're saying the young kids are going to get it. They're in the best position to get through this. We used to do this with mumps and measles and chicken pox and all that stuff. In fact, I had all of them as a kid because we didn't get vaccinated from that. They're saying that they can get through this, but the isolation, all of the loss of education time, all of the problems at home, all of that stuff is much more dangerous to the child and much more damaging to them long term than the possibility of this virus. What do you say to that?
So they are telling us that children are more at risk and endangered with their parents than in the public school system. Are parents okay with that projection, that their children are unsafe with them?
I think what they're saying partially, and I get your point, but partially, kids being isolated in the home, not having the socialization that they're used to from their friends at school, and all of that, and also being put in a position where now they're responsible for basically their entire education because their parents are working, and there's all the stress that comes on the family with that. There's some who argue, and I don't know that I disagree, that this is almost as harmful to kids in their development. So as an education professional, I'm interested in your position on it.
Well, I agree that I am a firm believer in education and in the public schools and in the kind of interaction and learning that kids do about how to be a good person, how to become a friend, how to be a friend, how to, be all the things that our parents want us to be. All of that is a wonderful part of the school experience. And every teacher out there would prefer to be teaching in the school building.
Right.
This is not, we were launching up for a fight against digitizing education when this all hit. And then we're in the middle of being the primary carriers of digitizing the curriculum. However, one of the things about the assertions that we're hearing is that, for instance, the president of the pediatricians in the state of Virginia is a partisan Republican and makes the case for the mental health issues that are being caused based on anecdotal data from his personal practice, not from actual studies. And I went about 4 months ago, and there may have been more published since then. About 4 months ago, I went searching for that information about increases in suicide, increases in mental health referrals, all of that stuff. The data wasn't out there for public consumption at that point.
Okay.
I searched for it pretty hard. And so most of what we're hearing, and I don't deny anecdotal information because it's valid, it's important, and it's your reality on the ground. And when a parent says to me, my kid is in high distress in these circumstances, I think it's important that we take them seriously and that we do what it takes to intervene on behalf of that child to help them meet their stressors. That being said, I just have not seen the actual, when they start telling us you need large-scale data to prove this, I have not seen that there. All I have heard is anecdotal information from individual doctors who were not necessarily nonpartisan, who may have been operating out of a Republican hat rather than a pediatrician hat.
So last question I've got for you, because, in looking at this, and this is a tough call on all sides. I tend to err on the side of caution. We're so close to the end of the school year, in my view, that I think we keep things the way we should be keeping them the way they are. And then, if look at it at the beginning of next year to reopen. It just seems like a lot of chaos in the middle that could have a hugely negative consequence. It just seems staying the course for right now seems sane and rational. What's your suggestion for the rest of this year?
Exactly the same as yours, Rick. I feel like if we were willing to just let this year go by in virtual or in some minor hybrid form, for those who feel it's really, really important that their kids get into a classroom. And a lot of parents are making that choice. We have opened, but a fraction of the people eligible to return are returning to the classroom.
Yeah.
Most are staying, by at least 50% are staying digital, and of those who are opting for in-person, they're not attending. There was a recent article in the Washington Post by one of our students saying he went to class. In one class, there were 4. In another class, he was the only one. So the parents are as hesitant, for the most part, as we are. And the push to reopen certainly seems partisan in nature.
Yeah, and also it comes down to the resources of the family to be able to do that. And sadly, the poorer our families are, the more difficult this choice is, because I don't think we've done enough to help families get through all of this. But that's a conversation for another day.
Oh, that is so true, and so important in what has happened. I would agree with you if we were willing to hold our powder until the fall. We might go back in a celebratory way, excited and happy, and able to protect our children.
There you go.
Right now, we are going to wind up protecting our adults for the most part, but we know our children will still be at risk.
There you go. Cheryl, I appreciate the time. I hope folks will take a look at your most recent article, Gaslit School Nation, written over at thirdmillenniumteacher.com. We'll get links out and hope folks can take a look at that. Again, I appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I really appreciate your show, as do all of my friends, by the way.
Outstanding. Love it. And thank you to all of them as well.
All right.
You have a great day. Our good friend Cheryl Gibbs Binkley. Again, make sure you check out her piece, Gaslit School Nation. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day the Exxon Valdez oil tanker spilled nearly 11 million gallons of oil in Prince William Sound off the coast of Alaska. The ship ran aground and collided with Bly's Reef. Most people remember the captain was held primarily responsible for the spill. By his own admission, he had passed out after a night of heavy drinking. But a number of factors also contributed to the environmental disaster. The National Transportation Safety Board issued its final report over a year later. In it, the board concluded that fatigue, reduced crews, and problems with regulations and procedures regarding drug and alcohol program all contributed to the spill. Union officials reported great concern regarding chronic fatigue of its members on merchant ships, reduced crews due to greater automation, and reduced scheduled ship maintenance. Crew members on the Exxon Valdez routinely worked 20 hours or more a day during routine cargo handling operations. The NTSB also concluded that vessel traffic service under the U.S. Coast Guard failed to properly track the Exxon Valdez. They had the ability to select a higher radar scale, but didn't. The Coast Guard suffered from reduced crews burdened with increased job duties as well. They also found that remote communication sites were inoperable on the night of the spill. The equipment was old, deteriorating from harsh weather conditions. Requested funding for new equipment had not been forthcoming. The Alyeska Pipeline Company, for its part, failed to have an oil spill barge loaded and ready to go. Major cleanup efforts were conducted during the spring and summer months through 1992, but marine life and the environments were devastated. Long-term efforts at monitoring and cleanup continue today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
ever have one of those days? I got to tell you, today was that day for me. It seems like nothing has gone right. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't have COVID. That actually went right. I'm actually pretty happy about that. It was one of those things where woke up and my boss calls and says, "Hey, don't bother coming in today." And I'm like, "Why?" "Well, so and so, they've got it." Oh, how'd that happen? And it's one of those things where you go, you like to think we're through it. You like to think we're past it. You like to think we're being careful. And bang! All of a sudden, it's there. And this is one of those things that I've been talking about this for a while. Wear the mask, social distance, wash the hands, stay away from large super spreader events. Try and do some sane things. Don't do anything stupid. And I'm around people who they're trying to. And you have this just pop up. I mean, it's just for me, it was one of those things as I was driving to go get the test today and, went and spent $75 on a rapid test because, we want to know. I'm thinking, this would really be horrible because, we've done all the things that we can do. We've taken every possible precaution. We've done everything that we can think about doing to protect ourselves. And your mind just starts going, where was I? Was there a moment where I didn't have the mask on? Because now I know I was around this person, and that's how this thing just it spreads. So when people are like, I don't need no stinking mask and all of this, my mind started going back to, because the people that had it or have it, I was around on Sunday with. So immediately my mind goes, well, Monday I had to go buy a new phone because my phone, thanks to Google, took a dive. And, so I'm like, okay, I had to go to the store. I had to deal with the guy behind the counter who I know, but we were never more than 8-10 feet apart. We were far apart, and they had the plexiglass, so he's okay. And then there was a guy who was angry about having to wear the mask and angry about the security guard at the other place who wanted to have masks. And I'm thinking about him, and I'm going, and this is where my mind just went to this weird world. I don't think I'd be all that upset if he got it, and it was just horrible. But that's what I was thinking. I'm going, I don't think I'd mind if he got it. And I'm thinking to the other people who came in and I was never closer than 8-10 feet to anyone. And I'm sure if I did have it, I didn't spread it to anyone. And I'm thinking about, how I interacted with this person and my wife, the kids, all of this. And you go, we're so close to the end of this. We're so close to people getting vaccinated. Because look, I'm on the list. And this is what was really kicking me in the behind. I'm going, I'm on the list to get the vaccine. And it would be my luck because I live under a black cloud anyway. It's always raining. I live under this just another horrible cloud, of which my wife is making sure that she reminded me that I should have bought the candle. And for those who know us, that'll be an inside funny joke. But I'm sitting here going, that would be just my luck. That, the day before or a week before I get the vaccine, I come down with it and it ends up killing me. But I wanted to throw that out there because we're so close. We're so close to some bit of sanity. We're so close to getting through this, and to rush back, like we did back in the spring last year. We were locked down. If we had completely locked down, and last night we talked a little bit about the people in Vietnam who they've eradicated it basically. And as someone chipped in after the show, the people in Vietnam are still wearing masks even though there's no virus, because they don't want it to come back. They're making the right choices. And it's us, it's us, the people who failed high school biology who are now, mail order epidemiologists. That's the reason we're in the mess we're in. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It just is what it is. And for anyone who cares, I was tested negative. I'm pretty happy about that. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Torrential rainfall has led to widespread flooding across portions of New South Wales.
Catastrophic flooding, the latest disaster to pummel Australia. Climate-related disasters now produce the most refugees in the world, plus...
So we're going to have to do equal parts looking to the future, but also taking care of what we've already got with an eye toward climate, with an eye toward equity, and with an eye toward all the jobs that we can create while also making it all safer.
Biden White House prepares massive infrastructure jobs bill.
All of those massive jobs and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A recent study even estimated that an average person globally could be ingesting about a credit card's worth of plastic into their system every week. Which kind of explains Capital One's new slogan, what's in your stomach?
You are what you eat. Does that make sense?
No.
This is your Green News Report.
Apparently it's 1.5% cashback, a few thousand free airline miles, and a shitload of plastic.
Okay, Desi Doyen, drought, heat, wildfires. Is there anything that has not hit Australia over the past couple of years?
Asteroids?
Oh, well, be careful.
True. In Australia, nearly 20,000 people in New South Wales have been forced to evacuate the worst flooding in decades after relentless rain triggered flash floods in some of the same areas hit by record bushfires a year ago. Some areas saw 5 times their average monthly rainfall for the month of March. 5 times in just 4 days. And there's more rain in the forecast. The flash floods have swept entire homes off of their foundations. In a press conference on Monday, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian called it the worst flooding in 50 years, beyond most residents' experience, and highlighted the repetitive disasters hitting Australia.
So we can't underestimate the ferocity of the extreme weather conditions. We've gone from extreme drought, extreme bushfire to now extreme flood. And we have to put that in context. And our first and foremost priority is to make sure people know they could be in danger and make sure they've got their plans ready.
Meanwhile, a new study has found that the pollution from last year's Australian bushfires injected huge amounts of smoke into the stratosphere, causing record atmospheric pollution over the southern hemisphere, according to a new study. The researchers calculated that smoke pollution was nearly 3 times higher than the monthly averages prior to the wildfires and similar to air pollution levels caused by a moderately large volcanic eruption. A different report has found that natural and climate-related disasters, not wars, now create the most refugees. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies reports that in just the last 6 months, over 12 million people around the world were pushed out of their homes. 80% of that 12 million were displaced due to natural and climate-related disasters. Asian and Pacific countries bore the brunt, with 26 climate disasters last year, including 3 storms that hit the Philippines in a single month that drove 1 million people from their homes and left 3 million without basic needs.
I guess I would say that's shocking, except for the fact that I listened to the Green News Report, and you have been warning about exactly this for many, many years now.
Here in the U.S., in a ruling with national implications, a bankruptcy judge has ruled that bankrupt coal company Black Jewel can walk away from at least 30 permits in 4 states under a liquidation agreement. The company must try to sell nearly 200 other mine sites, according to the agreement, but they can abandon those too if they find no buyers, leaving taxpayers to foot the cleanup bill.
So the taxpayers help subsidize these coal mines in the first place, and now the taxpayers get to clean up the mess when the coal companies walk away with all the profits, which they don't have because now they're bankrupt.
Correct.
The plan is sound.
Finally, AP reports that Biden White House aides have put together a $3 trillion infrastructure and jobs bill to revive the economy and create millions of jobs repairing and rebuilding the nation's crumbling infrastructure after decades of deferred maintenance. The package will focus on climate resilience and transitioning the nation to clean energy as part of Biden's Build Back Better campaign pledge. Democratic leaders have signaled they will probably use budget reconciliation to pass the bill if Republicans choose to block it. In a recent interview with MSNBC, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg made the economic case.
And I will say this about infrastructure investment. Unlike what was promised in the past about things like tax cuts for the wealthy, when you make an investment in infrastructure, it really does pay for itself. It's got a return on the investment. And I do think that ought to be part of the math as we're thinking about the finances here.
Nah, let's just think about tax cuts and giving all the money to the rich people. But this is potentially very good news. This huge, $3 trillion infrastructure bill?
Yeah.
We have been waiting for this for a very long time. We'll see how much of it they can actually get through with a simple majority vote in the U.S. Senate. But I think a lot of the climate bill is going to be found in the infrastructure bill.
One hopes.
One hopes indeed. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, former Pennsylvania Health Secretary Rachel Levine, now going to be the nation's Assistant Secretary of Health. She is the first openly transgender federal official to win Senate confirmation. Another first. And I got to tell you, I'll be honest, I saw another story today that Governor Newsom appointed the first Filipino to be in charge of something out in California. And we're seeing all these firsts, and we're making all these firsts. I'm looking forward to the day when we just go, former Pennsylvania Health Secretary Rachel Levine was confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health. And that's the story. Someone qualified for the job, doing the job, and it's not oh, look, hooray, the first. She was passed 52-48. All the Democrats and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins voted for her confirmation. All of the other Republicans, all the other 48, against. And here to share some thoughts of the top news of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So are you with me on this? Are you ready for the end of the firsts?
I mean, it's something that I think, you recognize. Now, for example, I just saw an article that I didn't know, but the first Native American vice president was, like eons ago, which I had no idea. I think under, Coolidge or somebody. I was reading that. I didn't know it. But in today's world, I think that, they'll recognize, a lot of firsts. Now, obviously, we broke the huge barrier with Barack Obama. And then I think, when you have the first female president, because now we've broken the barrier with Kamala Harris as the VP. But, it's going to be nice when it's just, so-and-so. So, then maybe we'll argue there's too many firsts or something. I don't know.
Because my problem with this is the reason I bring this up is, someone emailed me and go, well, she's not qualified. No, she's qualified. she's a doctor. She's qualified to do the job. She did the job here in Pennsylvania. I think when we do these first things, and I think the left's gotten themselves kind of in a problem because we're always looking for those firsts. I just want qualified people. I don't care who they are. I want qualified people.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'll tell you something that I was a little stunned with, and I guess I don't want to say correct. It was corrected, but Senator Duckworth had made a statement the other day, and when I saw it, I said, "Wow, okay." Where she would not vote for anyone that wasn't LGBTQ or I think it was Pacific Islanders or Asian. She wouldn't vote for any Biden nominees. Now, I understand she was trying to make a point here, and then the White House appointed somebody that's sensitive to diversity to work with her. I understand she was trying to make a point. But when then you come out and you say, I won't vote for any, well, that'd be like somebody saying, I won't vote for any LGBTQ people, you know. And then you start, and I saw that the other day, and I thought that is a huge mistake for her to say, I will never vote for any of them. Now, again, I know she was trying to make a point, but I think when you do that, and then on a political basis, I was worried about it in the sense for the White House, because who's the next senator to say, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to vote for any Biden nominees if blah, 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 you know, if they don't come from an Appalachian state. I don't know.
No, you bring up an Appalachian state. I mean, she went to Joe Manchin University on this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't surprise me, and I'm expecting more. I mean, I'm expecting more senators who want to up their profile and get some attention to say something like this. Hey, I've got my pet project over here.
Right.
And look, am I against the idea of diversity? No, not at all. But to stake that kind of a flag, you're now putting yourself and the leadership in a situation where they're going to have to go out and find someone specifically to fill that spot with except the most qualified, which plays right into the right wing hands of things like affirmative action not working. Right,
and there's the other thing. In my past life, I was an affirmative action investigator, by the way, way back when, in the 70s, and for construction projects. And I would always correct people, it's not a quota system. You can have quotas if you want. It's moving people up the ladder. So you got to be very, very careful because, in fact, if you say, well, I have two people of this nature and they're not qualified, then you create a problem, you know? So you want qualified people. That was back to your point, no matter who they are. But when I saw what Senator Duckworth had said the other day, I thought, and I sent it to some friends, and I thought, wow, better be careful of it. You just don't want to come out and say, I will never, even if it's a ploy to get more people that you want with diversity, don't say you won't ever vote for somebody unless they are a person of diversity when you're sitting in that Senate, and watch making criteria that, you have 50 kingdoms in the Senate.
No, and that's my fear. I mean, Joe Manchin has led the way down this path, and you look at his comments today against H.R. 1. He's not going to do anything he believes on voting rights, or even though he signed on to this bill, last session, he's not going to do anything on it until you get some bipartisan support. And his rationale was, it's going to make us more divided. And I'm sitting there going, is that even possible?
No, it's not. It's divided enough. It's quite divided.
Especially in a moment when Republicans all across this country, legislatures across this country, are moving on voter suppression legislation, from voter ID to ending early access to ending mail ballots to all of those things. And you're going, so you've got these two different competing sides, and Manchin's the guy kind of like, stuck in the, kind of putting himself in the middle, and is going to end up being responsible for one or the other or both.
Well, also, there's a process here, and anybody up on the Hill knows this, where you don't necessarily say, I'm not going to vote for, H.R. 1 or whatever, in the initial phases anyway. Right. Let the process go where the bills are massaged, people get interested in them. You never know what, and this is going to sound bad, but actually saying the word cutting a deal is not really that bad.
No.
It can be okay. So it goes through the system. But if you announce right away, and it's a dead tide place you're in, whether it's a committee or the House or the Senate, and Rick, you announce right away, no, that's it. Well, guess what? The other side says, there you go, it's done. But if you let it gel through a little bit, and kind of grow, then you might actually get something that will, work.
So you brought up something that I've argued privately a couple of times. That Manchin's the guy that they've put out there to be the one to cause this kind of rift that, hey, maybe it's not going to go through, in the hopes that maybe some Republicans come along. And I understand. I kind of get it. I just don't think there are any Republicans who are going to come along.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's going to be, few and far between. I'm not sure. Now, if nobody comes along on the infrastructure bill, then you're not going to get anybody on anything. I mean, that's the one bill that, can begin a process. But I will say this. Just because people will come on to that bill doesn't mean that then there's going to be a bipartisan Senate after that bill.
No, you're absolutely right. Now
they might come on just for a purpose.
Now, the Hill came out today and said that there's the Democrats are planning a move to squeeze the Republicans on the filibuster. Do you see any movement possible on the filibuster to where there are going to be moments where you can move legislation without a 60-vote majority?
Well, I don't know if they can do that. If they, again, I don't like the filibuster. I think it should have been done away with a long time ago. If they can't come to an agreement, they at least could be gentlemen and ladies and say, okay, in 4 years it ends, no matter who's running the chamber, and have that vote in concrete. I doubt that happens. I just don't think while they're sitting there, this is going to happen, and while it's 50-50, it's going to happen. I can't imagine what they would give McConnell that would satisfy him. I just can't. I can't imagine what would work.
Yeah,
at some point in time,
nothing.
If they want to get an agenda through, then they're going to have to do what I used to laugh about the drama of the nuclear option. Oh my, what a profile and courage they implemented the nuclear option to actually vote with a majority vote. Which is what they call the Senate nuclear option, eliminating or temporarily putting the cloture, aside. But I can't imagine what kind of deal they could cut with McConnell that would work. I don't see much faith in them being able to do something unless you cut a deal that you got to stand on the floor and talk along.
That's where I'm at. I've always been there. Keep the filibuster, but the minority has to be the ones holding things up, and they've got to do the heavy lifting. I think that's the right way to go about it. They're saying the same thing back about the judicial appointments. I'm still in favor of being able to filibuster that stuff, but if it's that big of a deal, everything else has to stop.
Right. And I just like to see them, at least if they're not going to take it away, then just take it away in the future, but have your vote now.
Yeah.
And that way you roll the dice. You don't know who's running the Senate at that time, because that's been the problem with both sides.
No, you're right. In fact, I just had a conversation with someone who said, no, we can't get rid of the filibuster because we're going to lose in 2 years, and we're going to need to be able to hold things up. And I'm going, that's exactly what you're complaining about right now.
Exactly. You set these rules and then go out, get votes, work, campaign for people, and get them elected.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, that's the theory behind suppress the vote so we get elected. No, don't suppress the vote. Just go get elected.
Let's move on. The big stink today was Kamala Harris didn't salute. Evidently getting aboard Air Force Two, didn't bother to salute. This is one of those things. I'm going to get your opinion on this in a second. But my grandfather, who served in World War II, I remember, when Reagan was president, he was incensed by the fact that Reagan would salute someone in uniform. It was something he was just, every time he would see it, he would almost lose his mind because he always said, the commander in chief does not salute someone in uniform. He's not in uniform. That's for uniform people. And look, I've never been in the military. I don't know anything about it. But he was quite adamant about it. And then you go back and you look, and Reagan was the first to do it religiously. It was something that he did all the time, and now it's just become practice. Is it wrong to go after her for not saluting?
You know, it's not the precedent. She's not in what they call the chain of command. That is a fact. Now, I know people are, while she should still, do the salute, but if you look at what military people would say about this, she is not in the chain of command and is not required to salute. Now, she's the vice president. She can salute if she wants. Technically, by the way, when members of Congress travel on overseas events or missions or junkets, whatever you want to call them, they have a status. I think it's like a 5-star general. It's really weird, but they get a status. But members don't salute unless they've been in the military.
Right.
They don't.
But it's just
put your hand on your heart, but you don't salute. But it's not a precedent. It's not a set, because she is not in the command of change, or chain of command, as they say it. Then it's not required for her to salute.
Yeah, but my grandfather's view on it was this is something for
for
men in uniform, and he was very adamant about that. So he'd have been flipping out if they were arguing that a woman should have saluted anyway. So, but that's a different era. He was that generation, but he was very clear. That's only for men in uniform.
I was always taught don't salute unless you were in uniform, and when I was unless you had served in the military. That's what we were always told, and that's why we didn't salute when we were in Congress to the military. Now, the commander-in-chief, which is the president, and then they call them commander-in-chief, salutes. They salute as a matter of courtesy, and that was started by President Reagan. And it's a matter of courtesy they do it. The vice president is technically a civilian who is not in the chain of command, and that's fact.
Yeah.
There's no requirement.
Yeah, I just go back to I still think my grandfather was right. It's a in uniform thing, and to then make that, because the next thing that's going to come is, well, you didn't salute right, because that was the other thing that my grandfather went nuts about, is he's even doing it wrong.
That's why I never ever, when I was in Congress for 11 years, Rick, I never did a salute, because military would tell you didn't do it right on your eyebrow. They'll be quick to tell you. I don't blame them.
No. And he was quite adamant about it, which is one of the reasons. He voted for Reagan, liked Reagan until that, and then it was nope. He just doesn't get it.
Reagan started the precedent, and if I am correct, I hope I'm correct on this. I don't think that Dwight Eisenhower, who was had been a general and became president, I don't think he saluted the military at presidential events. If I'm correct.
No, and I don't. I just. But again, we're going to beat that to senseless. But that's just my view on it. It has to. I take his words on it. For me, I think it's a uniform thing. I probably should get a person today to give me some thoughts on that. Let's move along. Russia. Evidently, Russia and China kind of warming up, getting a little cozy. That's kind of worrisome.
I think it's real worrisome, and if you throw in, let's say, India and a couple of other countries, it could be extremely worrisome. They're cozying up, and the fact remains, actually, that when you look at polling, a lot of people, for example, I brought up India. Indians overwhelmingly like Americans over Russians, but Russia is cozying up as it can, and China, to India. And I mention India so much because you take China and India, and you have 2.6 billion of the 7 billion on the planet, and then you throw in a power like Russia. So I think we've got to be concerned about it. We've got to take a look at it. And by the way, this is one of those things we can't sanction them. Let's sanction Russia again because it's cozying with China, or let's sanction China. We can't do it. So I think it's a problem.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the world realigning in very scary ways.
Right, and without us.
Because we've been out of the picture and have left a massive void globally for the last 4 years.
Well, we have, and I mean, I saw it years ago. We would go to the European Parliament. When you go there, you actually are given the ability to speak. And I would see some members of Congress stand up and ask, and I was there when this happened, address the European Parliament saying, "Where do you stand on Cuba?" And I thought, can you ask them where they stand on us first? I was there when that happened. Where do you stand on Cuba?
Yeah, can you find Cuba on a map? Because it's nowhere near you.
And that's European Parliament's business, and we've done that, and then we sanction. You know, they look the wrong way, we're going to sanction you, and we don't take any other step to try to, I don't know.
So let me ask you this then, because you bring up an interesting point. Because, you know, I know my Trump supporters are going to say, well, you know, Donald Trump tried to warm up to them, tried to be nice to them, tried to be, you know, pro-Russia, tried to bring them into the fold, and Joe Biden's just slapping them down like that evil Obama did.
Well, I mean, they could argue that, but I've always felt that we can go too far with it. I mean, I know Russia has the election tampering, and that's a problem. I fully understand that. But I always have counter-argued that, you know, we deal with China, and they're not so nice a government, and they're not nice to their people, and they have not been nice to us. But we still at least, you know, attempt to deal. And then with Russia, I think there's a difference though between admiring Putin and trying to, you know, have dealings with Russia itself. Now I know Putin is the dictator of Russia. I fully understand that, but I think we have to get away from, you know, the admiration being directed to Putin.
Yeah, when I saw that story, I'm like, this is a bad potential outcome, because with China's economic might and Russia's ability to produce energy, anything on climate is going to be, you know, thwarted. Anything on trade is going to be, you know, thwarted. This is the next Cold War.
It is, and we don't want to get back to what we got to when we had the last Cold War. That cost a lot of money, and a lot of money was spent on things that really became quite a waste.
Yep. Well, I'm just waiting for the voices to say we need bigger bombs. Let's take food out of kids' mouths and put it back into bombs.
Yeah, right. It was a bad era then, and it can be just as bad or worse now.
Scary times. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the time, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. And no, seriously, I mean, I look at this and I've been worried about this for a very long time. The rise of China as a superpower, and then they cozy up and marry up to Russia. That's a problem for Europe. And what's interesting is, you know, a lot of the European countries have been cozying up with China as well, because I think they see it too. And I think they were hedging their bets that if we made the wrong choice again, we get someone like Trump for 4 more years, and we have this void of leadership in the world. That China just keeps growing, and well, you know, who's left out? And this is one of those things I was concerned about over the last 4 years. That you had all this focus on North Korea and on Iran, and well, the giant love fest with Putin, who was never going to be your friend. You know, it's like befriending the bully who steals your lunch money, and you give it to him willingly instead of him taking it from you. And you think you're friends. That's the weird part in all this. And finally, some interesting news, and I think this is actually good stuff. Evidently, so what's being reported, Donald Trump is in talks with an app vendor, and then one of the names that they've thrown out is this Free Space. You know, we'll see. But there's talk within the next couple of months he's possibly going to jump into creating a social media platform so we can have all the wonders that we had with Trump Twitter, and maybe we'll just call it Trumper. Maybe, you know, Free Space will go away and it'll just be Trumper. But I'll be honest, I'm ready to have a platform where all of the treasonous folks come back and spew their nonsense, so we can see them all in one place, so we know who they are and where they are and what they're saying. For me, Parler was the place that I kept my eye on what everyone was talking about and how extreme these folks have gotten. And look, you know, fortunately, a researcher has before they shut Parler down, had downloaded all of it and has every one of those, I don't know what you call them, parles, one of the messages that were on Parler, like the tweets. He has all of them, and they're archived for all of eternity, and future generations are going to be able to look back at their grandparents and their live stream treason. So yeah, that I wish we had that kind of thing, back during the Civil War era, so we could look back and say, hey, look what these people actually said in their own words, and sometimes really in their own words because they make stuff up. So yeah, good times. Looking forward to it. I'm wondering how he's going to monetize it, and will right-wingers, who a fool and his money kind of thing, will they buy into it? Will this be a pay service? Will this be, something that Trump's going to make money on? He's going to need it. So I'll tell you, I went and I set up a free space account, just to see who's there, because I have an account everywhere. Because I think it's important to know what others are saying. And I'd love to hear what you're saying. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And remember, I want to hear what you're saying. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working